Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chad Novak once again, and I am here on behalf of the Saskatchewan Taxpayers Advocacy Group, which is a grassroots organization proudly standing up for individual taxpayers. Our organization believes strongly in providing fair and equitable treatment to all taxpayers of our great city. I am here today, this time, to comment on the business plan before you for the future of curling in Regina. The theme I'm going to talk about is around fair and equitable treatment of all taxpayers within Regina. With that in mind, I can't help but wonder why the curling clubs had to be responsible for funding 50% of the fees for their business plan, when just this evening we were witness to another business plan being drawn up for the Civic Museum of Regina, and the city funded 100% of those costs. Now, being that they are both community organizations driven by dedicated volunteers, I have to ask why the inconsistency in the treatment here. One thing that I have been frustrated with when it comes to community grants, property tax breaks, and the like, is the inconsistent approach. Here we have a perfect example. The Cali Curling Club had been receiving what appeared to be property tax exemptions for years, and then the other curling clubs applied and received property tax exemptions similar to what it had appeared that the Cali was receiving. This would be great because it would bring them on a level playing field and be fair to everyone involved. It is unfortunate, however, it is unfortunate, however, that the reality of the situation is that the Cali Curling Club never actually received property tax exemptions per se. I'm truly disappointed that this point was not brought up in any of the documents provided by the consultant or your administration. As you ought to be well aware, the Cali Curling Club, a tongue twister, actually is required to pay their full property taxes. The City of Regina has a 99-year agreement with the Cali Curling Club, in which the city rents space from the Cali for a clubhouse, which you'll see in Appendix A, for the adjacent city-owned golf course. Now, assumedly for ease of administration, over the years it just became accepted practice to offset the two, which made it appear as though it were actually a property tax exemption. It should be noted that the golf course is actually currently shut down, which effectively means that the City of Regina would not be using any of the Cali Curling Club for the golf course, and thus no rent ought to be payable. I'm not sure how the agreement is written up, so I will leave that to the administration to explain if they so choose. Speaking specifically to the business plan, I can't help but wonder why the consultant is recommending further tax exemptions, or that city administration is okay with recommending that as well. Throughout the report, it talks about other curling clubs across Canada, and not one of them receives a property tax exemption from their municipality. Not one. I do like the idea of amalgamating the clubs to realize obvious cost efficiencies and to have a unified approach to the similar love of sport. I have to ask, though, has the city ever considered providing them with a space at the exhibition grounds, similar to what currently exists for so many other great community sporting events? From a financial standpoint, I even have to wonder if the clubs need a handout from city taxpayers. Unfortunately, there are no current profit and loss statements within this report, so I can't tell exactly how each of them are doing financially. But based on the conversations at the Finance Administration Committee, it doesn't sound like any of them are in dire straits at this point in time. I shouldn't need to remind you that every single dollar that they and others are exempted has to come from somewhere, and that's typically from yours and my pocket. Keeping with the dollars and cents, I asked at the previous meeting with no answers, but what exactly is the $750,000 that the Cali Curling Club currently receives in Appendix B in quote-unquote subsidized rent as per your annual financial reports?
Mr. Miller, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, sir. There was concern expressed at the previous meeting about the timeline for these reports to be implemented. All I will say is, if you are okay with allowing your paid city staff to take up to 2 years to come back with a recommendation on community funding, I would certainly hope you would be okay with a 2-year implementation plan for volunteer-based organizations like the curling clubs and the museum. Finally, this evening, I would ask that you deny in full any future property tax exemptions subject to your administration's report on the future of these kind of financial assistance. It is not evident that it is financially required by any of the clubs, nor is it consistent with other community organizations that receive support by way of grant and are expected to pay their taxes in full. Thank you so much for your time today, and I will now open the floor to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Novak.
Thank you.